They are among the most different and diverse national parks in America. Yet all 5 of these parks call one state home.
When I see things like this, I'm really glad to be alive.
An American odyssey into the heart of the world. Rocky Mountain is the most visited of Colorado's national parks. It's not hard to understand why.
We basically say, close your eyes and think of everything that you would think of if you were to picture the Rocky Mountains.
Rocky Mountain National Park preserves 415 square miles of some of the most pristine mountain habitats in North America. Inside the park are 118 mountains over 10,000 feet, 20 above 13,000 feet, and one, Long's Peak, over 14,000 feet high.
And I'm grateful for the presence of mountains. They're almost like beings to me. They have their own character, their own shape. It's an emotional thing, the presence of mountains to me.
At Rocky are clear and clean alpine lakes, headwaters of major rivers, stunning waterfalls, and an amazing variety of wildlife.
Yeah, you don't see this every day. This is just unbelievable.
Yet, what separates Rocky from any other national park is this: the largest expanse of alpine tundra in the contiguous United States. Rolling through the tundra is the highest continuous paved road in the United States.
Just the view really it takes your breath away. The rocks and the mountains and the clouds. I feel like I'm in a cloud right now.
Here, on top of the world in Colorado, the natural world forges a bond with the human one. On the mesa tops and in the canyons of southwestern Colorado are relics left by an ancient people.
There's something about this culture, this group of people, I think, who have made a living in a pretty tough landscape that intrigues people today. How did they do that? How did they build this place? And how did they live here for so long under some pretty challenging circumstances?
Hundreds of years before the arrival of Europeans, the American Southwest buzzed with human activity. The people today known as the ancestral Pueblo thrived in the often harsh environs of southwestern Colorado. Their story of ingenuity is told at Mesa Verde National Park. Established in 1906, it was the first national park dedicated to preserving ancient homes of the ancestral Pueblo people.
Here we have these structures to remind us that people lived here. Here it is still standing in our face to say, this is how we once lived, and we did it.
Most remarkable is not just how they lived at Mesa Verde, but where.
But I think the attraction, when people hear Mesa Verde today, it's homes in the sides of cliffs.
The cliff dwellings were built by the ancestral Pueblo people around 1200 AD.
To walk amongst the ruins is an amazing experience, and you're trying to put yourself in the shoes and the sandals of people who lived here before and imagining what their daily life was like.
Mesa Verde National Park preserves more than 5,000 known archaeological sites and more than 600 cliff dwellings.
Cliff Palace is the icon of Mesa Verde National Park. And part of what makes it that icon is just its size. And when you stand there, you can't help but being so humbled, realizing that this is all built with somebody's minds, their hands, and their heart.
With heavy hearts, in the late 1200s, the ancestral Pueblo people left their homes at Mesa Verde. They migrated south into what are today the states of New Mexico and Arizona. The reason for their departure has been a mystery since the cliff dwellings were first discovered in the 1880s. But to their modern-day descendants, there is no mystery. Mesa Verde was their home for 800 years, and it remains a place where the spirits of the ancestral Pueblo people still reside.
Well, it's a sacred place. The whole outdoors is compared to as a church. And then when you go to Mesa Verde, Mesa Verde is like the altar of a Catholic church.
"200 miles to the east of Mesa Verde and thousands of miles from the nearest ocean are sand dunes that stretch to the horizon.
It just looked like some god had dumped, a ton of sand out in the middle of nowhere.
Here are streams that somehow pulse with rhythmic waves. And in the midst of a high desert, lakes and wetlands, all against a mountain backdrop where peaks stretch 13,000 feet into the southern Colorado sky.
This landscape is absolutely just amazing. This is not desert. I mean, you go to desert, you see a lot of sand over there, but here I can see, the streams around it, the sand, the flatlands, the mountains. Remarkable.
Great Sand Dunes National Park and Preserve is no desert mirage.
When you are rolling in from mountains with green trees on them, and then suddenly in the middle of everything, you have this brown waves of sand, it's gorgeous. It's just totally unexpected, and it's beautiful.
The dune field itself is protected as wilderness and is about 30 square miles, with some of the tallest dunes ranging into the 700 feet realm. Tallest dunes in North America.
Located in the San Luis Valley of southern Colorado, Great Sand Dunes National Park and Preserve is more than a stunning sea of sand. To the south of the dune field are wetlands teeming with bird species usually found on the seashore. To the north, a classic Rocky Mountain wilderness. But its heart is the mesmerizing sand dunes.
every single time I see the dunes, it's just, I'm in awe, it's beautiful. My daughter was so excited to come down. Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Is that the dunes? And then when she saw them, oh, Mommy, wow. So yeah, just absolutely breathtaking.
I think this takes its place among your Zions and your Mesa Verdes, your Rocky Mountain National Parks, your Yosemites. I think this belongs right up there because it's so unique and it's so gorgeous.
Miles to the northwest, the day begins at Black Canyon of the Gunnison National Park.
As the sun peeks over the edge and just starts to give a little bit of light into the canyon, things begin to light up. It's almost as if the curtain is indeed rising, and the grand show begins for the day.
And then all of a sudden, the earth breaks open. And there's this gash just staring right in front of you. And there's nothing that can prepare you for that.
Park rangers here call it the Big Wow.
And all of a sudden, you see a lookout point. You're like, wow.
It's wonderful. We can see how the Mother Nature shaped the world, and it's amazing. The first time I saw it, it's like thrilling for me. I'm so thrilled to see it.
It's not the deepest canyon in America.
Even just standing here, my heart skips a beat.
Or the longest. Or even the most narrow. But no other canyon in North America combines depth, narrowness, and sheer vertical wonder better than the Black Canyon.
You don't really see how sheer it is until you walk right up to the edge. It is absolutely sheer.
The vertical feet of 2,000 feet or so in a mile and a half, that's steep.
Here in the mountains of western Colorado, the Gunnison River has carved a vertical masterpiece, 2 million years in the making. The Black Canyon is 48 miles of vertical walls, thundering rapids, and billion-year-old rock. A spectacular 14-mile stretch is preserved as Black Canyon of the Gunnison National Park.
The Black Canyon sets a new standard of vertical for us. It's a place where your hands become sweaty, where your heart pace starts picking up. You start feeling a little queasy in the stomach.
At its steepest, the Black Canyon is 2,700 feet deep. At its narrowest, only 40 feet separate South Rim from North. In many places, the canyon is deeper than it is wide. Exposed are the very treasures of the canyon, metamorphic rock that has been buried deep in the Earth's crust for over 1 billion years.
It's Precambrian rock, meaning that the rock was formed before life on Earth. So it dates back to 1.8 billion years old. It's about not quite half the age of the Earth.
What makes it so awe-inspiring is how little it can make you feel. It's a spiritual experience.
Just 60 miles from Black Canyon is a completely different world. A place that wonderfully defies the Colorado of your imagination.
The scenery is a lot more like you'd expect to see in Utah. Very colorful, kind of a Roadrunner cartoonish type of landscape. And it's so foreign to most people that it's just captivating for them. It's a wonderful place.
Colorado National Monument is a geological wonderland of deep canyons, sheer cliffs, towering monoliths, and most of all, red rocks.
And that coloring is from the mineral hematite, which is an iron oxide. It's the iron that gets oxidized, like as it rusts, that imparts the red color to all these rocks.
At 32 square miles, the monument covers the same area as the city of Paris. Small in size, big on beauty.
It brings a sense of peace to everyone who comes here. Brings a sense of wonder to everyone who comes here. It's heart-stopping.
Though technically not a national park, Colorado National Monument has scenery that competes with any park, anywhere, anytime.
Well, the word that comes to mind is inspiring. This is really majestic. I come from a country with beautiful places, but this is as good as you'll see anywhere. And you just look around the wide open spaces, you look at the beautiful colors of the rocks, contrasted with the vegetation, and it just takes your breath away.
At Colorado National Monument, layers of sandstone in canyon walls speak to layers of time. But the star attractions here are the mesas and monoliths.
When Colorado National Monument was proclaimed a national monument in 1911, it was specifically for the erosional monoliths, such as Independence Monument, Kissing Couple, and Balanced Rock. These monoliths do separate this national monument from any other national park unit.
It was a drifter named John Otto who in the early 1900s found a home and a cause in these red rocks. John Otto's dream was for this place to become a national park.
When John Otto first came here, he said he came upon these canyons and they felt like the heart of the world to him. And I think a lot of people that come here, they get that feeling as well.
To truly appreciate the wonder of Colorado National Monument and the other national parks of Colorado, you must understand the forces that created them.
There's a layering of time that is represented here that really resonates in my soul. You can look up at the peaks today and see the snow that fell 3 or 4 days ago. And you're looking at rock underneath that snow that is billions of years old.
When they were born some 70 million years ago, the Rockies bore little resemblance to the mountains of today. Then they were rounded, not rocky. The slopes were not nearly as steep as we see in the park today. The Rocky Mountains were born from cycles of uplift and erosion. The Earth's crust began to fold, and in the process, thrust ancient rock upward. The violent uplift caused cracks and fractures in the rocks. Then, about 2 million years ago, the Earth began to cool. snow began to accumulate at high elevations. It was the beginning of the Ice Age. During the Ice Age, ice sheets covered much of North America. High in what would become Rocky Mountain National Park, glaciers formed. Mountain valleys began to fill with huge rivers of ice. Glaciers moved down the mountainsides, carving the rounded slopes, deepening and widening the valleys. Along the way, colossal masses of ice plucked and stripped the fractured rocks from their bases, grinding down the valleys like giant sheets of sandpaper. Then, about 10,000 years ago, the climate warmed and the glaciers receded. In the glacier's wake was a Rocky Mountain masterpiece. It's impossible to look at Rocky Mountain National Park and not see the powerful handiwork of glaciers.
The glaciers carved the landscape here in Rocky Mountain National Park, and the landscape tells you the story. That the glaciers were here.
Today, Rocky sparkles with the remnants of glaciers. Throughout the park are 147 alpine lakes. These lakes are, in fact, pristine pools of cold, melted glacial water from small glaciers and snowfields that still exist in the park today.
Mills Lake is superb because you get that reflection. You have Long's Peak and the keyboard of the winds. You have boulders in the lake, clearest, purest water. It's part of Rocky Mountain National Park to have that water element.
To see a classic example of the handiwork of glaciers, one need not look further than Long's Peak, which towers over much of the park.
Our highest peak is 14,259-foot Long's Peak. It's really our big iconic 14er in Rocky Mountain National Park.
On the mountain's east side, Long's rises almost 2,500 feet above Chasm Lake. The east-facing wall is a 900-foot slab of sheer granite known as the Diamond. From Chasm Lake is a stunning view of a cirque, a giant amphitheater-shaped bowl carved by a glacier. But the best evidence of the age of glaciers at Rocky is not on the high peaks, but rather in the valleys below. In Moraine Park are huge boulders and rocky debris that glaciers deposited from the mountains above.
Glaciers can move tremendous piles of debris, big rocks that can be house size or bigger.
Known as moraines, these deposits are perhaps the most impressive relic of the Ice Age. Rocky reminders of the unimaginable power of glaciers. Some 400 miles from the alpine landscapes of Rocky Mountain National Park lies a very different world. The only place in the U.S. where the corners of 4 states intersect.
The distant hills that we see is in New Mexico. And back in here, some of the mountain range that you see in the mountain, that's in Arizona. And then as we look out this way in the distance, To the north, that's Utah, and of course we're in Colorado.
At Mesa Verde National Park are flat-topped mesas, along with canyons of sandstone and shale that have been eroded for thousands of years by wind and water. Eroded within the canyon walls are alcoves, inside which ancestral Pueblo people constructed villages some 800 years ago. The very foundation of their lives here was built upon the geology of Mesa Verde. The creation of the alcoves would be a geologic process that would take tens of thousands of years. Melting snow and rainwater easily seeps through the porous sandstone, but the denser shale below stops the water from penetrating deeper. The water accumulates, and eventually underground springs form. Because the mesas tilt slightly, the spring waters flow toward the canyon walls. The freezing and thawing action of winter loosens the sandstone. The damp stone gradually cracks and falls into the canyon. The result is a C-shaped arched recession, an alcove. For the first 500 years they lived at Mesa Verde, the ancestral Pueblo people lived on the mesa tops above the alcoves. By 750 AD, they began creating more complex structures made of sandstone blocks and mud mortar, today called pueblos.
And I'd say right around late 12th, early 13th century, the majority of the population then moves, and many move into these natural alcoves that are formed in these canyon walls.
When you look at some of the alcoves in the wintertime, whether you're seeing Cliff Palace or Spruce Tree House, you can tell how the snow doesn't get too far back into the alcoves. It is naturally protected from rain, from snow. And so if their building is naturally sheltered, then so are they.
The alcoves also sheltered them from another threat: other humans.
I think Balcony House is a good example of a village that was located in an area where it's almost impossible for people from the outside to penetrate and to go into the village where the people live without being detected.
Cliff Palace is the largest of the cliff dwellings here. I think the shape of the alcove and the compactness of the site makes the architecture really stand out.
The sandstone that fell from the alcoves became perfect building blocks, but not so perfect tools.
Everything in this park is sandstone. You hear how soft that is? This is not going to make a good tool. So the closest place to get igneous and metamorphic rock generally is the Mancos River.
From stones gathered 20 miles north in the Mancos River, they created axes, knives, and other tools.
The most striking thing of the tools that they did not have was metal and the wheel.
We see the structures here. Probably the best construction that you'll see as far as the brickwork that was done. The smoothness of the wall. They shape the stones. You see a lot of dimple marks on these rocks here. They put a facing where they chip away to create a nice flat face on these stones here. And this was done without electrical tools, without steel hammers, without a blueprint. The mind did all that work, remembering, recording, and measuring, and everything else to make this happen.
When you're just hiking the ridges and you look down, you really do start thinking about how much power and force and over time it took to create this dune field.
It is a geological oddity. "30 square miles of sand dunes. The nearest ocean is over 1,000 miles away.
I'm surprised at how big it is. It makes you feel really small and insignificant. And it makes you wonder about how did this all happen? And how did this come to be?
How it came to be is a puzzle geologists are still trying to solve. The Great Sand Dunes are located in the northeast corner of Colorado's San Luis Valley, a massive basin in the southern part of the state.
Well, the San Luis Valley is about the size of the state of Connecticut, so it's a huge valley. And at one time, most of this valley was covered with a large lake.
The ancient lake covered most of the valley's 8,000 square miles. 500,000 years ago, the lake water began to recede. But smaller, often temporary lakes remained on the northeast end of the valley, not far from the present-day park.
But then when the lakes dry up, the sand's exposed to wind, and the wind gets blown from the center of the valley to the mountain front here, where we have great sand dunes.
To this day, the predominant winds in the valley, especially during springtime, blow from the southwest. The airborne sand was set on a collision course with the towering Sangre de Cristo Mountains.
The Sangre de Cristos are an incredible mountain range. They're very narrow and very straight, and they go up to 13,000 to 14,000 foot peaks.
Not only is there scenic value in these mountains, but they also play an important role in shaping the dune field.
Now for nature's plot twist. Instead of blowing over the mountains, the sand deposits became trapped in low pockets of the Sangre de Cristos. Roaring through these openings were opposing winds from the northeast. The northeasterly winds, which blow strongly in the fall and winter, push the sand back towards the San Luis Valley.
The wind is a key component to what the dunes look like, how they got here. If you're in the dune business, the wind is your bread and butter.
Caught in the middle, in the battle of opposing winds, were newly formed sand dunes.
So this combination of massive valley, wind blowing into the pocket of the mountains, and then the reversing winds here against the mountain front caused the great sand dunes to gain this incredible height.
Star Dune, in the remote west side of the park, is the tallest here. It rises 755 feet from its base. To the east is High Dune, which crests at 700 feet. From High Dune is a panoramic view of the massive dune field. Scientists estimate the main dune field contains as much as 7 billion cubic yards of sand.
Just kind of gives you goosebumps to come out here. It feels like some kind of outdoor cathedral.
The collision of rival winds continues to shape and sculpt the tallest dunes in North America.
When I hike out in the dune fields, I think it's really special because I actually get to see geology in motion. I think it's really rare to be able to witness something like that.
The great sand dunes speak to the power of wind. But the Black Canyon speaks to the power of water.
Black Canyon of the Gunnison is a unique geologic feature. The rock of Black Canyon is some of the oldest rock exposed in North America. It's Precambrian rock, meaning that the rock was formed before life on Earth. So it dates back to 1.8, maybe 1.9 billion years old.
And that's approximately 1/3 of the age of the Earth. And this is one of the older rocks in the state of Colorado.
As you walk in and see, you will just wonder how this was formed.
What formed it was the unlikely meeting of two geologic forces: the Gunnison River and the Gunnison Uplift. 70 million years ago, as the Rocky Mountains began to form, a dome of Precambrian rock, called the Gunnison Uplift, began to slowly rise.
So this push-up of material here, that was step one into getting us this exposure. And then, of course, step two.
60 miles to the east, the Gunnison River, step 2, begins its journey from atop the towering Elk Mountains. Initially, the river sets a course around the hard rock of the Gunnison Uplift, but its path is halted by volcanic eruptions.
To the north and the south of Black Canyon of the Gunnison, there are some very resistant volcanic rocks that basically slant or dip towards Black Canyon. In a sense, those volcanic rocks have armored the land surface and would inhibit the Gunnison River from moving outside of the place where it's presently located. The river seems to have chosen the most improbable course by cutting through these very hard, dark-colored rocks that give the park its name.
The result of 2 million years of erosion is one of the most spectacular canyons in the world. 2,500 feet deep in some places. Deeper than the Empire State Building is high.
Because of the Gunnison River cutting through the rocks of Black Canyon, you have absolutely amazing examples of these very ancient rocks. You just don't get to see those rocks typically because they're, in most places, very, very deeply buried.
Here, you can come and you can touch a rock that's a fraction of the age of the entire Earth and really have a connection with those geologic forces that created this planet.
At Black Canyon of the Gunnison National Park is the tallest cliff in Colorado, the Painted Wall. Standing at 2,250 feet, the Painted Wall is over twice the height of the Eiffel Tower. The rock face is streaked with pegmatite, magma that millions of years ago was thrust through cracks of molten rock. But it's the remote north rim of the Black Canyon that offers perhaps the best view in the entire park.
There's one particular viewpoint It's called exclamation point. And at exclamation point, you're looking straight down to the bottom of the canyon. And if you're there at the right time with the wind absolutely still, you can hear the roar of the river down below you. Gives you a sense that you might be the only one there for miles and miles.
Geographically speaking, there are only 60 miles between the Black Canyon and Colorado National Monument. But the chasm between the geology of the two parks could not be any wider. If a geologist died and went to heaven, this is what he might see. Unlike the dark hues of the Black Canyon, Colorado National Monument is a vibrant rainbow of red.
One of the really distinctive aspects of the geology of this region is that it is much more similar to the geology that we see elsewhere in the region, specifically areas like Canyonlands in Utah. And that's because this area is part of the so-called Colorado Plateau.
Spreading across 4 states in the American Southwest, the Colorado Plateau is famous for its amazing geology. Places like the Grand Canyon, Utah's Canyonlands, and on its northeastern corner, Colorado National Monument.
So it's beauty, it's solitude, but it's also a window into time.
To look at the canyon walls is to read a textbook on the geological history of the planet. Like at the Black Canyon, the bottom layer at Colorado National Monument is Precambrian rock. That's where the similarities end. Atop the ancient bedrock is a brilliant layer cake sequence of sandstone. Each sandstone layer provides clues about the monument's geological past.
This red rock behind us is the Chinle Formation, deposited when the North American continent was very close to the equator. If you visit someplace like Tanzania, you'll see red soils that look just like this.
The Chinle layer spans 90 feet and consists of cemented sand, silt, and mud. It was deposited more than 200 million years ago, a time when this land was a lush floodplain with fern and conifers growing along tropical streams.
Above that and back is the Wingate Formation.
The Wingate is a 300-foot-high slab of petrified sand dunes. This sandstone dominates the canyon walls of Colorado National Monument. The Wingate represents a period when Sahara-like dunes covered these lands. Atop the Wingate is the Kayenta Formation. This thin layer represents a period of increased moisture during the early Jurassic period. Capping the layer of Kayenta is the salmon-colored Entrada sandstone. The rounded cliffs are another layer of fossilized sand dunes. These from an ancient sea that once covered this land.
So collectively, the rocks of the monument and elsewhere in the Colorado Plateau are extremely important records of changes in Earth history, and here in the monument is an especially nice example of these changes.
The layer cake walls of the monument are only part of the story here. What gives Colorado National Monument its identity are the park's spires, rock sculptures, and monoliths.
Our story here is very much about geologic erosion.
At the very time glaciers were carving a new landscape at Rocky Mountain National Park, geological forces were transforming the lands of Colorado National Monument. Wind, water, and weather eventually wore down the fragile sandstone walls. The result is a panorama of sandstone sculptures, carved by forces of erosion over eons of time.
The erosion that created the canyons created these monoliths, red rock spires thrusting up into the sky that are more stately, more beautiful, more powerful than anything man could make. It makes you realize your place in the universe and the force of nature that created those, in their own way, are, I think, very spiritual icons.
Balanced rock is 600 tons of precariously perched Wingate sandstone. Devil's Kitchen is a rock grotto of upright Wingate capped with Kayenta sandstone. But the best example of erosion is the park's iconic landmark.
Features like Independence Monument represent a place where that process has gone to an extreme. Basically, the entire wall has collapsed, and all we have left is an isolated pillar.
Thousands of years ago, that isolated pillar was part of a sandstone wall, separating Wedding Canyon from Monument Canyon. The Wingate sandstone withered away, weakening and wearing down the walls. Eventually, the sandstone collapsed, leaving a freestanding monolith. Independence Monument towers 450 feet from the bottom of the canyon, the same height of the Great Pyramids. Eventually, the sun will set on the carved stone here. Erosion and time will reduce Colorado National Monument to what it was millions of years ago, a single layer of ancient bedrock. For many, Colorado National Monument and all the national parks in Colorado shine brightest once the sun slips below the horizon.
Sunsets here are really like no other. You have a situation where the curtain is closing for the day. The colors change from pink to orange. And that black sort of starts to envelop the sky. And the beginning of the dark, dark night.
These 5 Colorado parks have some of the best night skies in America.
Well, the Milky Way is our home galaxy, and it consists of probably 200 to 400 billion stars and amazing masses of gas and dust.
Black Canyon of the Gunnison National Park, stargazers often gather to view the amazing night skies. Barely in focus this evening is the Andromeda Galaxy, some 2.5 million light-years away.
And the Andromeda Galaxy is kind of a special object for me in this park because the light we will see tonight from the Andromeda Galaxy started on its way to us at about the same time that the major erosion was taking place here at Black Canyon of the Gunnison National Park.
It is a perfect finish to a day at Colorado's national parks. Five amazing landscapes created by forces of earth, weather, and water, all united under a magnificent dome of sky, atop the heart of the world.